Hello, Bill. We're back after a hiatus when I was in the UK and the Netherlands, but you've been traveling too, right?
Yes, last week I spent in Athens, Greece at an economics conference, a rather large one, and it was quite a good conference. And Susan and I had some really nice meals in Athens.
So, well, lovely.
Yes.
Sounds delightful. But we're back, and today I want to talk about what's happening in my old hometown, Portland, Oregon, as Trump plans or is deploying 200 members of the Oregon National Guard for some unfathomable reason. And then more briefly, I thought we would consider the restoration of Jimmy Kimmel's program.
That's a good idea.
What's on your mind for today?
Well, a few weeks ago, there was a lot of economics news that's relevant, and then it mostly went so badly that Trump stopped talking about the economy. So then there was the interest rate lowering, and the International Economic Powers Act was affirmed by the Court of Appeals, withdrawing his tariffs and stuff. So there's a lot going on there.
Okay.
And then there's been developments in his attempt to fire the Federal Reserve governor.
Right. Okay. So would you like to start?
I can, yeah. In early September, the Bureau of Labor Statistics released its new job creation numbers for August and its revised numbers for June 2025. As you recall, President Clueless fired the director of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because the June report didn't show a large enough job increase to support his claim of a growing economy. The June revised figures have just been released as of September 5th, which are obviously more accurate because more surveys have been collected and more data taken into account. In June, the economy lost 13,000 jobs. Yep. Job growth was negative for the first time in 4 years. You know, those 4 years when Joe Biden was president. The jobless rate, otherwise known as the unemployment rate, rose to 4.3, the highest level since 2021.
Now, a quick question. Do we expect unemployment to rise in the middle of the summer in June?
Yeah. There's always a turnover.
Right.
Of jobs. People retire, new people come into the job market. For example, the high school graduates who are not going on to further education in June end up in the job market, and once they're in the job market, they can be counted as unemployed.
Okay, so losing 13,000 jobs means, all other things being equal, it's
right.
A big loss.
Oh, yes. Well, he was concerned that it didn't go up enough. And the estimate was that it went up by a couple 100,000. Actually, it went down 13,000. So this is disastrous news. The August numbers, which will be revised as well, also did not show robust growth in jobs. Just 22,000 jobs were added in August, dramatically lower than the economists' expectations of 76,500. Since when the economy has been going up, the revised numbers tend to be higher than the original estimated report, and when the economy is going down, the revised numbers tend to be even lower than the original estimate reported. This does not bode well for the next set of revised numbers. Expect them to show job losses. Indeed, long-term projections are showing continuing job losses for some time forward.
Okay, so I have another quick question. Does this relate to the number of people that have been swept up by ICE? Certainly.
And there is, that's also a cause of the inflation that we're experiencing. 70% of the agricultural workers are immigrants, and they're simply not showing up because of ICE. And so employment's down from the fact that farmers just can't hire anybody to do these kinds of jobs. So these are vacant jobs, but they're not filled. There's no one to fill them.
Okay, so...
Now, nobody wants those jobs. That's part of the problem. They don't pay very well.
So with increasing prices, what do we call this?
This is what we called in the 1970s stagflation, which we talked about last time, and we know at least one of our readers heard it. This is awful news for all of us. So the first question is, with these bad numbers, who does Trump fire next? As of September 11th, it was reported that initial jobless claims jumped to 263,000. The weakening labor market led to a decrease in interest rates by the Federal Reserve Board. But the rising prices, indicating continuing inflationary pressure caused by the tariffs, would not be a factor that would ordinarily lead to a decision to decrease rates. Right? Ordinarily, they wouldn't take that into account. Indeed, on September 11th, the Consumer Price Index went up by 0.4% in August, and the core inflation rate for the year accelerated to 3.1. Businesses have depleted their inventories. Indeed, Stephen Stanley, chief economist at Amitander U.S. Capital Markets, said the evidence is overwhelming that more tariff-related inflation is coming in the months ahead. Additionally, labor shortages in agriculture, as I just mentioned, thanks to the ever-popular policy with Trump voters, ICE raids, are causing food prices to increase. Now, the decision by the Federal Reserve Board was a small incremental change. It was 25 basis points, that for real people means 0.25%. Trump will blame the job numbers on the Fed slow-walking lowering the interest rate, because, of course, massive cuts in federal spending and firing thousands of federal employees couldn't be a causal factor. Between those two Trump policies and the massive uncertainty created by his erratic policies, complicated further by the fact that many of those Trump policies are illegal, certainly will play a much larger role than the Fed's interest rate policy. Companies do not invest and hire because interest rates are low. They invest because of expectations of future profits. Uncertainty means they cannot plan in such a way as to achieve those profits, so they won't invest and they won't hire. Additionally, and this is happening, consumers facing unemployment and higher prices are also likely to reduce expenditures when they can be deferring purchase of what we call consumer durables like housing and automobiles and appliances. And those are the things that have had the highest inflation rates. This decreases overall consumer spending, so we simultaneously have investment going down from the business sector, consumption going down from the consumption sector. Usually you would offset that with government spending.
Right.
Okay, and Trump is massively cutting spending. So all the factors that contribute to effective demand, whether or not the economy is going to grow or fall, right now they're all pointing downward.
So to answer your question about whom should Trump fire next, it should be
Trump. Yeah. Additionally, Trump got the news just after our last program that his appeal of the decision of the U.S. Court of International Trade that his tariffs imposed by executive order invoking the International Economic Powers Act was affirmed by the U.S. Court of Appeals. As we predicted, this means that all of the tariffs imposed by Trump's executive order declaring a national emergency, which are the vast majority of the tariffs Trump imposes, were unconstitutional and illegal. They usurp the power of Congress to determine tariffs. By implication, all these tariffs that he later modified by executive order are similarly unconstitutional. But that will be determined by whether the Supreme Court upholds the appeals court's decision. This decision, if upheld, will require the Treasury to refund between $750 million to $1 trillion to importing businesses, though the mechanism of refunding this money is still unknown. But a secondary market in tariff money refunds has emerged, with financial companies buying the right to receive the importing businesses' refunds at a discount for which they can get immediate cash, which these companies need right now because they have paid those tariffs.
So there's always a way, even in the middle of a disaster, to make money.
Yeah. And there's just, as you're going, Then just to affirm the lawlessness of the Trump administration, a federal judge ruled that Trump's use of the National Guard in Los Angeles was an unconstitutional deployment, violating the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878, which restricts the use of federal troops for law enforcement. This could have serious implications, as Trump has threatened to send federal troops, principally National Guard troops, from red states to Chicago and Baltimore, and now he's decided to include Memphis and Portland. So maybe we should turn to your discussion of Portland at this place and find out where the National Guard is going to be bored next.
Where they're going to be raking leaves in parks. Okay. Well, as the media maven in this duo, I've been thinking about how to confront the hate-filled rhetoric the Trump administration uses to divide America from itself.
Absolutely.
And it's difficult. It's difficult to think that problem through. Just this past weekend, Kamala Harris called upon the Democratic Party to, quote, fire with fire.
Sorry.
You okay over there?
Yeah, I knocked my coffee over.
Bill was so excited by my quoting Kamala Harris that he fell off his chair.
Okay, now we have to keep this.
While the chair... Kamala Harris called upon the Democratic Party to fight fire with fire, while the chair of the Democratic National Committee, Ken Martin, has said he's tired of Democrats who bring, quote, a pencil to a knife fight. And now that the congressional Democrats, and especially Schumer, have gotten the message that their constituents want them to do something, they have taken the bold step of doing nothing and closing down the government, which I acknowledge is better than caving as Schumer did last time. But it does emphasize how powerless the elected Democrats really are in the face of the Republican majorities in both houses.
There's an interesting thing here in that the rhetoric of the Republicans is that the Democrats are shutting down the government so that illegal immigrants can get free health care.
Exactly.
And the ridiculousness of that is illegal immigrants cannot receive any form of aid from the federal government.
Yes.
So it's just a complete and utter lie.
Yes.
And the funny thing is that again stymies the Democrats because,
It absolutely does.
It's paralyzing for them.
In fact, I was thinking of one example where they've put out this AI-generated meme of Hakeem Jeffries with a big mustache and a sombrero, a racist stereotype of Mexicans, and some kind of mariachi band. All of the players in the band are Donald Trump, and they think this is hilarious. Well, what's Jeffries' response? He says, I think if the president has something to say to me, he should say it to my face. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's fine for the school ground. But what he should have said is, this meme promotes the lie.
Yeah.
That somehow we want to give health benefits that are not legally available to, and they blew the opportunity.
Yeah.
Instead, he took it personal, and I don't know. It just went to McKee's mouth.
I saw one senator today, and I don't recall which one, who, when asked this by a reporter, said, okay, that statement is a lie. Let's clear that up. And then he went to talk about what they were actually doing. But that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Not only is this a lie, it's a racist stereotype, and this is evil.
Exactly. Precisely. Anyway, they do seem begeistered. I agree with you. Now, for a Democrat, on the Democrat side of how to respond to the Republican rhetoric, Gavin Newsom, I think, has breathed life into this hankering we all have after someone to counteract how Trump and his minions frame their destructive actions. He uses political satire to clap back at Trump in order to reveal Trump's narcissism for the embarrassing nonsense it truly is. And it's a tactic that proved highly effective in breaking through the media noise about ICE arrests in California along with the possibly the lawsuits filed by California in getting the number of National Guard troops and Marines reduced from thousands deployed to Los Angeles to the remaining several hundred National Guard. And the reason there's several hundred National Guard still in LA is that one of the lower courts said that they could stand until the Superior Court actually decided for sure on the question of deploying national troops. So my assumption is they're going to be gone very soon. Anyway, the political leaders in Oregon have adopted a very different rhetorical approach, and I find it interesting because it uses humanizing language to counter Trump's dehumanizing rhetoric, and it responds to divisive demagoguery with a strong sense of community and rational argument. Oregon's governor, Portland's mayor, and the commander of the Oregon National Guard assume that most Oregonians, and by implication most Americans, will see through the flimsiness of Trump's justifications for disrupting the lives of 200 Oregon National Guard troops because the ongoing demonstrations at ICE headquarters make it, quote, a war zone. There have been demonstrations there every day, usually in the daytime a handful. There have been scuffles and arrests at night because of hotheads who are creating confrontations, but there's nothing that the Portland police can't handle. Now, just as a point of comparison, Bill, I want to compare how the Oregon governor speaks on these issues with what Governor Pritzker of Illinois said about the plan to deploy troops to Chicago. He said, "What I have warned of is now being realized. One thing is clear. None of what Trump is doing is making Illinois safer. This is an attack on neighborhoods, on lawful residents, on U.S. citizens. That's not preventing crime, as Donald Trump claims. That's threatening public safety. But as I've said many times, for Donald Trump and the MAGAs in Congress, this is not about fighting crime or about public safety. This is about sowing fear and intimidation and division among Americans. It is about creating a pretext to send armed military troops into our communities. This is about consolidating power in Donald Trump's hands." I want to be really clear. I agree with Governor Pritzker's forceful, cogent warning, but what I propose is a comparison of political rhetoric and how it frames the relationship between the public, state politicians, and Trump's actions. Pritzker is addressing the nation as a whole and condemns Trump's authoritarian motives. This is Oregon Governor Potek, on the other hand. Quote, "I have a message for Oregonians. Let's not take the bait. Let's not respond to what the president is trying to do. We have to raise our voices absolutely, peacefully, to the things that we believe in. But I also want to say that property damage or violence of any kind will get us nowhere and will not be tolerated. If you want to respond in opposition to the Trump administration, I would ask that you lean into supporting your community, helping people, making things better here, because that's who we are as Oregonians. I want to wrap up by saying I believe the president does not have the authority to deploy federal troops on state soil." And of course, the court's hearing today, Oregon's call not to allow these troops to be deployed for an injunction. Potek, in her speech, addresses Oregonians specifically and includes herself as an Oregonian, using the first person plural, the things we believe in. Let's not take the bait, and that's who we are as Oregonians. She appeals to the better angels of their nature. She humanizes the National Guard, who will be deployed to Portland. In one instance, she said members of the Oregon National Guard are Oregonians. They're going to have to leave their jobs, leave their families, for a mission that is unclear, and I would argue unnecessary. In another statement, she again reminds Oregonians that they are members of a community with common values. Quote, I want everyone to remember that the Oregon National Guard is made up of Oregonians, who are citizen soldiers, who are our neighbors and our friends, and I will use everything in my authority to support them as Oregonians, and I will have their back. This was carried both on the local television station KATU, and it was also on Instagram. In a remarkable letter to members of the Oregon National Guard, Brigadier General Alan R. Gronwald similarly described Oregonians as a community based on common values. Quote, I know some of you may have strong feelings about this mission. That's okay. You are citizens first, but you're also service members who took an oath to support and defend the Constitution and follow the orders of the President and the Governor. That oath doesn't come with an asterisk that says, only when I agree with the mission. We don't get to pick and choose. We execute lawful orders with professionalism and honor, period. That's what sets us apart. That's what makes us the National Guard, close quote. He acknowledged that those who volunteer for the National Guard are motivated by the desire to help their neighbors face natural disasters, and by implications, not to face contrived and delusional emergencies. Quote, I also want to be clear with those of you who aren't mobilizing. This doesn't diminish our ongoing state mission. We will continue to respond when the governor calls, whether for wildfires, floods, ice storms, or whatever else Mother Nature or circumstances throw at Oregon. We're still Oregon Guard, and we remain ready to serve our communities. This hasn't and won't change, close quote. He also humanizes the situation for those who are mobilized and find them and what they will find themselves in when they are deployed. Quote, I'll be honest with you. I know this isn't easy. Some people in Oregon won't understand or won't support this mission. Some might even be hostile about it. But we've been through tough situations before. We are professionals who do our duties regardless of how it's received. We are the Oregon National Guard, citizens, soldiers, and airmen who serve where we live. We've been doing this for over 150 years, through wars, disasters, and everything in between. We don't serve because it's easy or popular. We serve because it's our duty and because we took an oath. To those mobilizing, execute your mission with honor. Stay focused, stay professional, and stay safe. To those remaining, stand ready, support your teammates, and keep taking care of Oregon. We're in this together, always ready, always there. I think you might agree, Bill, this is a remarkable letter to troops on their deployment.
Absolutely.
General Gronwald assumes that Oregonians can understand the situation for the pretense that it is, that they understand the need to obey the law, and that as Oregonians, they signed up to help their neighbors and communities face natural disasters. I saw a local television station, again KATU, interview a man on the street near the ICE headquarters, which is where the National Guard will be deployed. Asked how he would respond to seeing National Guard soldiers in the street, the Portlander said, I intend to bring them donuts. They don't want to be there.
They'll be good donuts, too.
Oh, Oregon donuts are magical. That's true. While Governor Patek agrees with Pritzker and other governors that the federal deployment of the National Guard in this case is illegal, she doesn't accuse Trump of a power grab. Instead, she strongly hints that he is weak-minded. She makes it clear that Trump thinks Portland is a war zone like World War II because he watched old clips of the battles in the streets of Portland with anarchists and the Proud Boys during Trump's first administration. Trump is no less dangerous because he is delusional, but he needs to be handled with kid gloves, or he will create havoc. That seems to be her message. I think this is the first time, and you can correct me, that a political leader, certainly a governor, has framed opposition to Trump's authoritarianism not as a direct confrontation with Trump, but as an opportunity to meet dehumanizing rhetoric with a humanizing sense of common values, as a way to mobilize how citizens understand themselves as neighbors and members of a community. And frankly, I think that might be the way forward.
Well, it will certainly be the way forward to a better outcome, but there is the problem that Trump's rhetoric gets covered by the news nationally. The more outrageous, the more coverage he gets. So sound reason arguments often get lost in that. And his rhetoric is very divisive. I was reading a piece just yesterday about an analysis of how he refers to all of his opponents, all of them, as sick, rather than as someone he disagrees with politically or in any other way. And the analysis of this is that, first of all, using the term sick implies that the person he's discussing is not capable of reason or promoting an alternative and is possibly contagious, as a result has to be confined or something of that sort.
Right.
But the author also writes that this is an indication that there's real derangement here or simple-mindedness because he can't think of anything more effective. It may also be highly ironic. But this is a strategy of, disqualifying his opponents from participating in so he never has to face the argument.
Right.
He just disqualifies the opponent and dehumanizes them along the way. And that's going to be hard to counter with reason because the gut level response to his kind of attacks on people seems to stir them in ways that make them less reasonable.
I absolutely agree. And that's why I think it's so difficult to think how to respond to the divisive and hate-filled rhetoric that Trump and his minions have to rely on.
Yeah.
And lies, because otherwise they couldn't do anything. But of all the different ways, the kind of machismo response that we saw from Hakeem Jeffries, if he's got something to say to me, he should say it to my face. Pritzker's combative, it's just a power grab. And then this, and obviously Newsom, who does understand how to break through the noise. I mean, his ironic parodies really did. But I think there might be a value in politicians learning to address the public in not Trump and not his minions first, but the public as a trusted group with a common sense of values that they need to think about right now. Who are your neighbors? Who do you want to think about? That maybe reframing in that way could provide a way forward. But, this business of being able to claim the airways and also, the meme universe, it is proving to be an effective way of getting the attention of the press. I don't think it's highly effective in getting approval rates for Trump, but then I don't know, am I alone in thinking that this deployment of the National Guard is a rehearsal for what they want to do in the midterm elections?
Well, certainly his speech to the generals and NCOs indicates very clearly how he sees using the military in cities in particular as a way of suppressing any sort of political activity will be considered as we get closer to elections. And I mean, we have some elections coming up in November, not national elections, but important elections for governors and things. and throwing federal troops into the capital city of a state that's voting for a governor puts a spotlight that is totally distracting from the campaign that might be quite important going forward.
We do need to talk about those generals.
Yeah, that was bizarre.
Should we do that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, he called together all the command level generals and admirals to one place and their top NCOs. It was the pretense was that the Secretary of Defense wished to talk to them about their mission and direction. It was almost unparalleled. I can't recall any time that ever happened. And of course, it was disruptive of the mission of all of those commands to have their leader and their top NCO suddenly go to Washington. These are very professional people and very serious people who probably went there thinking this was a serious event. And of course, Donald Trump, for the first 40 minutes, gave his standard campaign speech, in other words, an incoherent rant about what he doesn't like about his opponents and how hard done by he is, followed by the saying that they are going to be deployed to fight the war in the streets from the war within, which sounds like 1950s Red Scare stuff all over again
sure
with
does,
military. Yeah. Obviously, they sat there quietly listening because this is the commander-in-chief. And he was upset because they didn't applaud, which tells you how well he understands the military. But then he did avoid the draft 5 times. So, and then the guy who didn't avoid the draft, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of War, there's a big step forward for America, got up and began insulting the generals based on his time as a major in the National Guard with one deployment. Presumably that experience gave him greater expertise than people who had spent their entire lives moving through the ranks in the military doing incredibly dangerous things on our behalf. I'm sure it was a humiliating embarrassment to be compelled to sit and listen to these two idiots.
Well, this is, a number of things. There are a number of layers of things. One is telling the military that they should do their training in cities.
Oh, Jesus.
And second of all, Hegseth disparaging the rules of engagement. And saying, well, this, you heard the president talk about economic liberation day. This is another liberation day when you can feel free of rules of engagement and conduct, military conduct, to the top ranking officers in the United States military. I mean, first of all, they hate the guy, and they have from the beginning, but what is that to say? What is that to say? First of all, one of the reasons you always follow the rules of engagement and conduct is that if you don't, your enemy doesn't. That would just be a pragmatic reason. It's not that those rules are just annoying. They're there for a reason. And then to tell the military that what they do is kill people and break things, they're not thugs.
No, but their leaders are. The president and the secretary of war are thugs.
Precisely. So my question is, I have 2 that I want to explore during the coming weeks. First of all, what did they say to those generals when the cameras were off? I mean, they called them there for a reason. Did they issue directives? Did they tell them, if you don't do it our way, we're going to purge you? I mean, what actually went on behind closed doors?
I suspect that the threat of purge is what causes these officers to engage in deep thought, because there already has been a purge.
Yeah.
Very experienced, very qualified military personnel have been fired without cause because the president doesn't like their skin color, their gender, or the fact that they made suggestions in his previous administration he didn't agree with. He thinks the people he's appointed are going to be his lackeys. He really does not understand the military.
Okay, let's take that as a given, and that just telling brass that they'll lose their pension if they don't do it his way probably won't have a lot of leverage.
No.
But the other question I have is, what were they saying to each other?
Yeah, that would be the really interesting one. You know, these people are all in the same community, the same business, the same profession. They certainly communicate with one another informally. They certainly compare notes. They certainly discuss contingencies. And boy, would I like to be a fly on the wall for that. You know?
Which is why assembling them, assembling the minions all in one place at the same time might not have been the most intelligent thing these two clowns could have done, because surely they're talking to each other.
Well, it may have created a spree de corps in a way Trump and the secretary did not intend. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. First of all, when was the last time all these generals are sitting in the same room watching this clown show? Yeah. Watching their president up there shamble onto the stage, talk about, I don't know, bird cemeteries under windmills, and how he's afraid to go downstairs, and what could they think about the next order that came out of his office?
It's pretty frightening.
I mean, people have been court-martialed just for asking the question, if I get an order to, push the nuclear button, what if I don't think the president is sane? I mean, officers have been court-martialed just for asking that question. But isn't it kind of a cogent one right now?
Yes. And, as we talk about this actions in the military, there have been many courts overturning his other executive orders. The judiciary, at least at the lower level, is resisting Trump. And I want to talk about something we've talked about twice. A couple of weeks ago, U.S. District Judge Gia Cobb in Washington based temporary restraining order blocking Lisa Cook's firing from the...
I'm so glad you've returned us to that, yeah.
The central bank, the Federal Reserve. And she remained on the board and, in fact, voted to lower interest rates, as did all the members of the board except the most recent appointee. And whether Cook ultimately stays in the Fed will be decided by the Supreme Court now. They announced yesterday that no, she will not be removed from the court until her case is heard, and that order, will be appealed to the Supreme Court. The Hill reports, if Cook simply made an unintentional error in filling out home mortgage applications with no criminal intent, that would not constitute a cause for her firing or a crime. Inaccuracies on mortgage applications are common and hardly ever prosecuted or even discovered unless the government is looking specifically to target someone. Now, the interesting thing about this is that she was accused of listing two residences as primary residences and getting mortgages at lower interest rates because of that. She has since produced documents showing that she regularly and consistently referred to her Atlanta residence as a vacation home, which would indicate that there was no intent ever to hide the fact that this was not her primary residence. Moreover, the Supreme Court has put itself in a really awkward place. It's used its informal docket, where it doesn't have to present arguments for decisions, to allow Trump to fire members of other commissions.
Yes.
And the Supreme Court has been allowing that and even hinting, not telling the district courts and appeals courts to follow their lead. But they can't, all right, because they are in fact bound by precedent. And the precedent is a case called Humphrey's Executor versus the United States. And in this case, Franklin Delano Roosevelt fired a member of the Federal Trade Commission because they disagreed politically. And this made it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914, where Congress created it, made the firing of an FTC commissioner for any reason other than inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Okay, this was unanimous. And this is the governing precedent that the Supreme Court is indicating that it wants the lower courts to follow because they don't want to overturn it. And Lisa Cook is why they don't want to overturn it, because they want to accept that ruling for the Supreme Court appointments, but not for the agencies they don't like. Now, the concern is that a challenge to this precedent is coming up in December. But all the congressionally created regulatory commissions,
right,
and they're appointed, but the president can remove them for cause, and he is limited to inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. They are trying to get around this because the Republican majority agrees with Trump. They want a strong executive, and they don't like these agencies any more than he does, but they don't want him messing with the Federal Reserve. So if they overthrow the precedent, then the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve are open targets for political manipulation, and they're afraid of that. So they're trying to hint to the courts, don't bring us these cases until we decide what we're going to do with this. And Lisa Cook's case brings this right to the foreground.
Okay, so Republicans have no problem getting rid of federal commissions, except they don't want anything that might disrupt the economy.
Go figure.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, right? They don't care about him messing around with these commissions. They don't like the commissions very much. They've been hinting at this for a long time. But they see two things. First of all, the Fed is too important to the stability of the economy to be politicized this badly. It is, to some degree, politicized by virtue of the appointments that are made, but once they're appointed, like judges, they fill out their term. The problem is they're not always going to be in power.
True that. Yeah.
Right? So when the next Democratic administration comes around, then they are free to do exactly what they're doing now if they overturn this precedent.
Okay.
So they want it both ways, but this is hit, and I am sure when Trump announced that he was firing Lisa Cook from the Federal Reserve Board, SCOTUS went, oh, crap. Because there's no way they're going to avoid this now, right?
Yeah.
This is going to come up in two cases, one in December, hers in January. And even if she loses at the Supreme Court, all that means is he can kick her off the court, but her court case will still go forward. In fact, the fact that the Supreme Court took the case indicates that they see her suit as having merit.
Okay, so even if they find against her, there's still another case to be
Sure,
heard.
this is just the restraining order to keep
right.
her from being fired
Right.
immediately. Then she can go to court and claim that he didn't show cause and demonstrate that she
Right.
didn't, and then be put back on the board, presumably. So in the meantime, he can make an appointment and then get a majority of the board as people he had
Well,
appointed. So it's very strange.
speaking of people who act just like capitalists, I wanted to talk a little bit today about the point where free speech, or at least free entertainment, and capitalism collided. And that's the Jimmy Kimmel case, which was a very bizarre 5 days in American history. He had the temerity to say something about Charlie Kirk that struck some people as offensive. Now, that impression turns out to be as full of holes as the allegation that, she took out 2 primary residence mortgages. Because he said, when he returned, with tears in his eyes, it was a really brilliant response, he would never advocate the shooting of a 22-year-old young man. Ever. And so the whatever it was that was going on with Charlie Kirk, and it seemed to me it was like an apotheosis, like the crucifixion of Christ. I mean, it just had this tremendous symbolic power, and that's why they went after him. That's why, because there's another merger pending, and Disney wanted it to go through, and this seemed to be a condition, so they up and fired him. But then two things turned out to happen. One was, people discovered that there's this button you can press to unsubscribe from the Disney package, period. And since that's where the money is in streaming, they noticed.
So did their stockholders.
And that was the next thing. And then their stocks went down, and there were a number of things said about that, which is, well, you can't really make causal conclusions about stocks falling because there's so many variables and blah, blah, blah. And it turned out, no, actually, the accountants at Disney were making exactly that equation, which is, no, we're really going to bleed out here, or we're going to take a hit. And of course, the other thing is, Disney is only about entertainment.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's as stupid, if it's a corporation's cruise ships or Disneyland or ESPN or or ABC. It's only about entertainment.
Yeah. It has no political agenda.
It doesn't make
well, making money is a political agenda,
right.
But the content is just entertainment.
So the other thing that happened, of course, a lot of celebrities came forward and said, no, this is reprehensible. But what was not as well reported was the unions in the entertainment industry in Hollywood, who said to Disney, no. The Writers Guild said, this is really reprehensible. In other words, you want to hire us? We're not going to be there for you. Well, I think that was a very strong union action. It wasn't just the writers, it was all the unions in the entertainment industry basically said, no. So you had the consumers pushing their little unsubscribe buttons, celebrities, and the unions all saying this, no, you thought this was going to be a big nothing burger, but it's a big deal.
Well, I'm sure they recall the last writers' strike that was went on for a while and moved TV in the direction of dumb reality shows because they didn't have to be written or scripted. But in the streaming universe, the public consumes this stuff at a rapid rate.
Absolutely.
So they need a constant stream of new material, which means they need the writers, right? The executives and accountants can't write the shows. So that was a very powerful threat that they could not ignore.
They also need the talent.
That too.
They need the talent.
But there's a lot of hungry people out there who want to be on television, which they thought would work in the writer's strike, but it really didn't because it was bad television.
Exactly. And so, and of course, the other thing that I found interesting was that in covering this, the legacy media kept referring to late night comedy because, of course, this happened also to Stephen Colbert. It's not late night comedy. It's late night political satire. And it's the space, evidently, I think what we're learning from Kimmel and Colbert, this is the space where Americans have decided to gather to gain that sense of solidarity, that they're not alone in seeing both this is a clown show, but a very, very dangerous one. And I think that was just brought forward so forcibly by this demonstration on behalf of Kimmel and Colbert's Emmy, where he had his whole production crew with him to say there are 200 people who are responsible for this show. And part of what he's saying there is, and you're throwing them out of work to CBS. But my point is that Americans are hungry for a space that says, okay, we have to be in solidarity with each other, but the way that we're going to find it is by making sure we understand that this is a source of political satire.
Moreover, this is an administration that does not understand humor.
At all.
They don't get it. First of all, they are humorless themselves. They think insult is comedy or funny or saying bad things about people. And it does get attention, but that's not the same thing as applying critical intelligence to point out the contradictions in what's happening between what the politicians are saying and what they're actually doing.
Which is the function of satire,
is
to open up that distance. And so Kimmel had Colbert on his show.
Yeah.
And Colbert had Kimmel on his show at pretty much the same time. And they both discussed what it felt like to find out, that the axe had fallen. And again, the enthusiasm in the audience and the number of people who watched. When Kimmel came back, he broke records on the number of people watching him. Really does say, okay, the politicians don't get it.
Yeah.
This is what people want. They're waiting for this. And somebody said to me, well, Americans aren't reacting against ICE. Well, I have two things to say to that. One, there's no unsubscribe button. There's no way to undermine capitalism, which is what this was about.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't mean that people are not paying attention. Apple, I don't know if you heard this, pulled an application today from their app store that allowed people to communicate where ICE was.
Yes, I saw that.
And they were advised by the federal government, this puts our agents in danger, so they pulled it. Again, they just cave so easily. But the idea that Americans don't care, that's belied by something as obvious as late night satire.
The funny thing about taking that app down, once something's on the internet, it's never gone.
Well, that's what I thought, too.
And so people are going to get access to this and use it. They can't download it from Apple now, but it's on the web.
That's what I thought, too. I thought, take it down all you want. It's there.
Yeah. They'll find a way.
And the necessity of, part of what you were saying is the Republicans don't know what humor is. This racist meme of the sombrero with the mustache and that. It's not funny.
No.
But what Colbert did, because Colbert's got nothing left to lose, he made a meme. Vance, when asked about this, says, the president has a great sense of humor. He just thought this was funny. Even if it's not true, it's funny. Ha ha. Colbert's gang made a meme of Vance stretched out on a sofa, face down, making highly rhythmic movements with a sombrero on his tuchus. Crude, but
Effective.
Colbert said, and by the way, I'm going to run this every chance I get.
Should we move on to the list of hits? Trump's executive order on birthright citizenship was declared unconstitutional by a federal judge, and Trump has now asked SCOTUS to move this forward quickly and decided in his favor. The executive order forbidding federal workforce unions was blocked by a California judge who found persuasive evidence of it being a First Amendment violation. You know, the First Amendment, they really had to read that. There's that whole free association thing, too. Executive orders on diversity, equity, and inclusion were banned. Orders terminating government support for DEI initiatives were blocked by federal courts, with judges finding them both unconstitutional and harmful. Executive orders punishing law firms, multiple courts have permanently blocked Trump's orders against specific law firms, finding them unconstitutional attempts at retaliation. The obvious unconstitutional character of the Trump administration's orders and policies is simply a result of his need to feed the Trump voters red meat to satisfy them with his performance as president, while his actual policies are destroying these same Trump voters' livelihood. I think the best one was declaring anybody who was anti-American or anti-capitalism or part of some organization, Antifa, which apparently doesn't exist, and probably will soon.
Well, there are people who identify themselves as Antifa in Portland.
Yeah,
But
it's not an organization.
No, it's not a thing,
we're
yeah.
not talking about the Irish Republican Army
No.
here. So, what does this mean? Anti-American, anti-capitalism. It's not like we have meetings. When you send the FBI to round up everybody who's, anti-American by meaning not agreeing with Trump?
I do want to point out to you that at last we're understanding what Trump and his supporters mean by Make America Great Again. They yearn desperately for the McCarthy era. They're sad that that's over. And I think they really like the idea of the Palmer raids. We just round up people who are communists and put them on a ship for Russia. That's what it means to be great again. So,
Are we going to put the judges in white robes with pointy hats? Like I said, no sense of humor.
How did we get here?
Yeah, the hits just keep on coming.
So we said last time, or you did, every time we do this, you feel worse when it's over than when you started.
Well, part of it is, one way of coping with this is just to step away from it. And I've heard a lot of people saying, they can't watch the news. They can only read portions of the paper. They look at little condensed things online, but they just can't absorb one hit after another. And it's constant. It's an offense against everything it means to be a decent human being, hitting you in the face every single day.
Which is why we have to think, where are the people who are opening up our own sense of common identity and purpose, who are helping us restore a sense of confidence and joy, and galvanizing us to protect those who need our protection. That's what we need most. Frankly, I think our politicians, the Democrats, are failing us, except for a few. And that leaves me with one last thing to say that may cheer you up, and then we got to go because we're out of time. So, Cuomo, who is running to be mayor of New York, against Mondami and a Republican. Okay. He did this ad where he shows himself doing a bunch of jobs, labor jobs, in New York and saying, I can't drive a subway, I can't wash windows, I can't, and it's all AI, so it looks like he's trying to wash a window on a high rise or trying to do this or that. And he says, but I do know how to be a mayor. And I thought, who did you hire to write this one for you?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm totally incompetent at everything regular people do, but I can be in charge. That is a compelling argument. I think I'll vote for him twice in this next election.
We should have gone into PR.
Yeah, that's really ridiculous.
Or
Well, I must say I have confidence in the people of New York City. I believe they'll do the right thing.
I do too. I think Mondami is going to come through with flying colors. And next time we should talk about his dad, who was a political philosopher.
Great.
Okay, we'll see you next time.
Yep.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.